recorded live at Town Hall here at Miller Measurements. This is AE Squared. So, you know, there are few experiences in life that matches the adrenaline, the fear, the speed, and the enjoyment of auto racing. We've all been there. We've been on go-karts. Maybe in high school, if you were like me in a small town, you didn't think the cops were around, so you had a little car racing, things of that sort. But if you ever wanted to take it to the next level, and you had the means to do it, our guest tonight is the man you want to get to know. So Greg Gill, friend of mine here in Austin, Texas, is the CEO of SRO Motorsports in the United States, which is part of the international SRO Motorsports group. And we couldn't be more excited to learn more about this business model, about Greg as an individual, and what's going on in the world of autosports. Greg, welcome to AE Squared.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Good to have you.
It's great to be here.
It's good to have you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so this is an interesting time in autosports, right? I find myself a recent convert watching F1, but F1 has kind of gotten interesting. This whole concept of there's the best, and then there's the best of the rest. What's the state of the union? Who's the people that are driving in there? Is it more, shall we say, an equal playing field in SRO? Talk to us a little bit about SRO, what it's all about.
Well, I think even before we talk about SRO and we use the word motorsports, and people all define that differently. For some, it's growing up with tractor pulling. That's where they live. For others, it's the competition to, just get the fastest Uber driver who's going to get you where you want to be. So, we define it, and it's easy to say, well, we use the word GT, and that kind of means something to people because they've seen it stuck on cars and areas like that. It comes from the expression Grand Touring. But as long as mankind's been walking upright, there's been a desire to be there first. Right. And that's what motorsports is about. We take a current form of transportation and we push to get there first. And how do we do that? How do we execute that? So then in the state of things, what's great about what we do in sports car racing is it's actually vehicles that people can vaguely recognize. These are not what they call open wheel cars. You talked about F1 as an example. Indy cars, another area. When we say open wheel, we're talking about cars that don't have fenders on them. We're saying the tires on the side of them. So when you get involved in sports car racing, you're looking at something that has a vehicle silhouette that you recognize. By the time you get behind the wheel, you recognize it's a completely different type of vehicle, purpose-built for racing. But at the end of the day, it's a recognizable model. That makes it easier for people, because even in America's racing form, we would call that NASCAR. Today, other than the branding on the cars, they all kind of look the same, and it takes some of the fun out of it for us. Literally at Circuit of the Americas here in Austin, I watched it happen where someone in the stands was there with my wife, commented, "I like that car," and went out and bought the same model BMW that day, used. So there's an example of where people can relate to it, and I think that's what sports car racing offers today. It's something I can relate to. Granted, I have to have a checkbook, as you say, to have the means to be able to do it.
We'll get to that. So let's play the tape back a little bit. How did Greg Gill get into motorsports? Tell me that story. How'd you end up where you is?
It's a work release program, and it works.
Oh, you're
exactly,
paroled.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why you can't see the bracelet there. Seriously though, it's something that came as a lifelong love of cars and of everything that goes fast. And as I always tell people, growing up in Southern California in the era that I did, there were two things you had to be part of. You had to be part of the surf or beach culture, and you had to be part of the automotive culture, because those were both very big in the 1960s and 1970s in Southern California. So I think I was exposed at a young age to sports car racing in the form of my stepfather. Had been around Jaguars and Jaguar racing, and in term at home, again in the era that I grew up in, there was a lot of discussion about straight line quarter mile racing, drag racing. So I was exposed at a young age of discussions about how to get there faster.
So are you, was your passion to wrench on the car or to be the guy in the car racing?
Well, I think, as you said, there's always those things that you did that maybe you look at later in life that might not have been completely legal. But when it came to me very early on, I realized that my talent lay behind the stands, so to speak, and not behind the wheel or wrenching on a car. I've had experience in both, but at the end of the day, I'm the business guy.
But you didn't Okay, so you didn't come like right out of school and go right into auto sports. You were in publishing, right?
Yes, actually,
So tell me that.
I grew up in a family business that was architecture and construction and project management. And I really thought my path was going to be towards building buildings and being an engineer. And that's what I would plan to do in school. And I got involved with a friend who was in the publishing company, and I'd always been in love with the written word. Back then they had ink smeared on dead trees, and it was called magazines.
Oh yeah, I've read about those.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's an
online.
amazing concept.
Yeah.
And I fell into that, and it was in the automotive space. And so it was really a great experience to be part of a golden age of written communication, and worked for a wide variety of publications that way. So
Right.
that's what brought me into the automotive area and kind of married personal passions and interests in automobiles with a business that was all tied to that.
Right, and so you went from publishing then to the predecessor to
Yes.
SRO, right? Which
Correct.
was the Pirelli, was that Pirelli World Challenge
so
then, or what was
our
it?
parent company is a company called WC Vision.
WC Vision.
And now we're WC Vision doing business as SRO Motorsports America. So the entity still lives.
Okay.
But there's a business that we've just celebrated our 30th anniversary this weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was a big deal. Yeah, you just finished your season, didn't you, this last weekend?
Yes, we
Vegas.
did.
How did the season end up for you guys?
Well, thank you. It was a little over 100 cars, not on the track all at the same time, but a variety of classes, and a great experience. And we invited, actually, because we're part of a global group, we invited all of our customers from around the world to come celebrate. We did a 1,000-person gala at the Bellagio. It was quite exciting.
100 cars. So how many teams is that? I assume that's not like 100
It's
racing
actually
teams.
it's not far off of that. You probably had 81 separate teams represented out of those 100 cars.
That's fascinating. So let's dig into that for a second. I know about F1, IndyCar, NASCAR, all this stuff. Compare and contrast for me, SRO. Is this a professional racer type thing, or is this a like autocross? I have a brother-in-law that's got a 240Z that he souped up and he likes to go race in the weekend. Talk to me about who's the driver, who's the owner in SRO compared to these other formats?
So I think a good distinction is what we would call factory back racing or customer-based racing, where an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, would say, Ford, let's use an example, we want to take the GT car, we want to go to Le Mans, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to pay this much money to do it and develop it to do
Right.
that. Another version will use Porsche, Bentley, Ferrari as examples. They will have GT cars that they will build and sell to private customers and their teams to go racing. So we like to call it a model of customer racing. So where Jeff, with his tremendous financial means, is racing with us.
So you have both? You have both?
We do. We have factory support, is what I would like to say, and structure it as, versus a trailer that says, oh, this is the factory race team. That trailer is there to support those customers who purchased the car, and they're now going racing themselves.
Okay, so you've got private owners and you've got auto. Is there the chance, do you have the same thing like in F1 where you've got the Mercedes team with all the money and maybe Ferrari, and then there's the best of the rest type scenario? Or how do you keep that balanced?
It's always that's a great choice of words, balanced. We use something called balance of performance. So our research around the globe, we take all the data and metric points that we get from each weekend's results. We look at the power, the weight, the horsepower, the output of what happened and what happened on the track, and then we compare track to track around the country, and then we take that Ferrari, Mercedes, Bentley, Porsche as an example, and then compare them, all very different vehicle designs, power to weight ratios, et cetera, and we give a balance of performance so that hopefully, even if you do have more money than the racer in the paddock next door to you, maybe you're going to have a balance of performance that allows everybody equal opportunity to win.
So whether you win a race outright, depending on how you win or what vehicle you're in, there's a weighted score, if you will. And is there like a ranking in the season?
And kind of before your first or second question there, at the first part, we try to level the playing field so that the vehicles are within a few tenths of each other if driven at the optimum level. Now that comes down to execution then.
Yeah,
Because what happens if I blow a tire?
Right.
No amount of predetermination is going to fix that. But how good is my team and how fast is my team to fix that tire?
Right. And do you have the same nuances of others in terms of different tire compounds and strategy for pit stops? Things that, are there penalties if you've got to change a motor, things like that, like in other racing leagues, or is this something different?
Very similar that way, and you do have people thinking about tire degradation.
Right.
Pirelli is our supplier and is one of our few homologated across the entire series. You must use Pirelli tires.
Pirelli tires.
Everything else is fairly open within each manufacturer's individual homologation.
Right.
So in that sense, people do have to manage then what tires am I going to put on, when am I going to put those tires on, at what point in the race am I going to make a driver change, et cetera, and then they have to make those strategy calls.
So most of your races are a 1 or 2 pit stop type where
One
there's
pit stop.
more of that
Yes.
game time strategy decision. It's not just who's the fastest around the track on.
From here to here.
Yeah.
And well, I think one thing you see too is we break it up a little bit. We have at our top level our GT3 cars, and we have a 90-minute races on a weekend.
Yes.
And there's a driver change within a 45-minute window period, roughly speaking, where they have to come in, they have to make those choices, and then they have to figure out how fast they can get in and out and get the work done on the car that needs to be done, get the next driver in and out the door. The other times we run a straight sprint format with a single driver.
Right.
And that instance is really get to the front of the pack as fast as you can, win the race.
And do you guys follow the same, there's a practice day, a qualification day, and a race day, and that where you're,
Yes.
or is it, you said 90 minutes, is it the first one to get X laps, or is it the first person, or at the end of 90 minutes, whoever's got the most distance wins?
40, 50, 60, and 90-minute are our windows that we run under, and it is a timed contest.
It's a timed contest.
Yes.
So when 60 minutes is over, whoever's
In
traveled
front.
the furthest.
Got it.
Got it. So now that I understand a little bit about the racing, can we talk a little bit about the business model?
Sure.
Because this is an interesting thing, right? We all read about Bernie Ecclestone, right? An F1. We've watched here, COTA, the financial, it's a big deal, but then there's no races. And it's always fascinated me, how do you make all of that work financially? Because those are huge investments. And in SRO, you're saying that these are personal private owners. I know that SRO has some TV, but walk me through what this, as the president, how does this financially work?
So it's really, in a lot of cases, it's a B2B model.
It's a B2B.
So you're looking at, there's B2C at some of our larger races. We do the 24 Hours of Spa at the end of July, and it's almost 100,000 people. And you could say at that point it's very much a consumer pitch of Total, the fuel company, is the sponsor of that event, and you can see them and the people who participate making justifications based on that.
Yeah.
However, from a business standpoint, most of what we do, people look at it and say, yes, I'm putting the name of my company on the side of this vehicle, and I'm going to get a lot of media impressions between live streaming and CBS Sports, but at the end of the day, it's the people I invite out to be part of it. They're enjoying it. I think a classic moment came from me it may have been Amazon, it might have been Microsoft, a guest that was visiting us, and they said, I've played all the golf I want to play. This is fun. They enjoyed seeing something different. They had maybe certain notions about it.
Right.
They realized now this isn't maybe to use the movie parlance, this isn't the Fast and Furious. This is not gunfire and car crashes. This is a heavy amount of engineering, preparation, and great physicality to make this work.
That's fascinating. All right, I want to drill into a little bit more of each of the stakeholders and what you just explained to me. But first,
turning the pages. Staring at faces of people that I'll never know. Echoes in the wind, I can hear them fall. Cracks beneath our feet catch our fall.
Green flag, I'm around it, I got your love on my hands. Do you understand? I'm around it, man. I'm around it, man. I got blood on my hands. Do you understand?
right, we're back. So let's go through each of the stakeholders that serve, because as I see it, and let me see if I got this right. So you've got teams, then you've got automotive manufacturers, right? Then you had mentioned this B2B play, and we're going to step into that. And then 24 hours of spa, but one of the things that I want to get into a little bit is that I'm noticing in elsewhere also the advent of esports, right? And to draw especially young men closer to the sport, but through the avenue of video games. So we'll get to that one in a sec. But let's go back on the teams. So the typical team is owned by somebody who has a company. Their company is on the car, if you will. And this is a competitive individual.
Right.
And is it true that most of the time it's that person who owns the team is racing, or is he putting a driver in it?
About half the time. I think you find people maybe who started it in their 20s and 30s. As they get into their 40s and 50s, they start maybe driving less. Maybe they're co-driving.
Right.
As they get into their 60s and 70s, we do have a home for them, but they may be more inclined to look at, okay, I have a business case. I know how I want to work this, but I need somebody who's quicker behind the wheel than I used to be.
Got it. So as a business owner, president of a company, here's an interesting question, at least from my perspective. You have 80 to 100 teams. How does that scale? How do you go out and find and attract more people that are, that corporate owner, a person of means, and introduce them to or entice them to enter in to add to this league that you've created? How do you do that?
I think it's really basic. What's fun for people? What's their interest level? Again, you can be a world-class golfer at a certain level. We'd like to think about it that we have two types of customers. Ones who are extremely busy continuing to make the money that puts them in the level to be able to do this, and another category of customer that is extremely busy spending the money that they've made or that their parents made that they want to be able to enjoy. In both cases, time is the common factor.
Right.
So they've got to be able to go in, experience this very not easy to do, not easy to replicate thing. When you're back at the water cooler, so to speak, or at your other peer group talking about what you did over the weekend, not everybody took their car and went 150 miles an hour around a racetrack. A lot of other people
everyone wants to.
Well, but a lot of other people have a private jet.
Sure.
They have a lot of the same common experiences, vacation homes, etc. But when it gets down to it, ooh, I haven't done that yet.
Right.
And so I think there's a level of an exclusivity that is there that people say, I'm doing something that not a lot of other people do. I met a land speed record holder that has worked with me, and he pointed out that the particular land speed record he had, there were less people with that record than had walked on the moon.
That's fascinating.
So this is a narrow group. We think of motorsports as very egalitarian and, boy, anybody with a car can go do this. True. But when you start to get to the levels that we operate at, and you mentioned F1, no, it's a very small group of people. And not only because it's expensive, but you've got to want to do it. There's a joke within our paddock that says, why do people race? And it's easy, because they want to and they can.
And they can. So this is kind of on par with like Richard Branson wanting to take a balloon around the world. You're
very much so.
Right. This is the explorer mindset that you're looking for. The person who's not risk averse, that's looking for that edge.
Exactly. We don't have a lot of shy people or people who are afraid to take a challenge or a little bit of a risk.
We'll have to have a discussion another time. That's a lot of big personalities to work with too, I can imagine. All right, so sponsors. Let's talk about sponsors. You mentioned Total. I know in our first episode, we had Colin Black from CrowdStrike. They sponsor you.
Yes.
Right? And there's other sponsors as well. Why does CrowdStrike sponsor SRO? Let me not say CrowdStrike, but more in general. Why should any company sponsor that? And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm trying to understand what's in it. What is it that they get in that sponsorship?
I think it's twofold.
Right.
First, we all have to take a bit of a step back, because we, especially in North America, we've grown up with the impressions of NASCAR.
Yeah.
And if I put Tide on the
Tide
car,
on, yeah.
40 million people will go buy Tide. Those days have passed. And the type of racing that we do is not really about that. It's about relationships. So I like to joke with people, and I will get during the process of a business deal, someone will say, now why would I want to do that? And I say tongue in cheek, well, you get to work with me. Yeah, and you know, that usually gets the same type of laugh.
Sure.
But what we want to point out to them is that there's a compelling business case for what they're doing.
Right.
They view it as a way of connecting with customers. They had to have a personal passion to be there.
Right.
But they had to have a desire, because they could be horse racing, they could be yacht racing, they could be doing something equally expensive with that same level of thrill and risk that we've talked about. But at the end of the day, they look at it and say, this is a compelling business case that can be made for my business. When I go back to my board, I can say, I'm spending this amount of money, but here's the business case behind it.
Right.
There is still, even at this point, as a good example, when we came to Circuit Americas last year, I think we had 16,000 people at the racetrack, a place that holds 100,000 people,
Right.
so looks pretty small over 3 days. But at the end of the day, we tallied up our live stream viewers, not our CBS Sports viewers, but just people tuning in live, and we had 965,000 people.
965,000.
Yeah, or you could say 1 million if you want. I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, 1 million.
And so that really pointed out to us there's an interest level in GT racing.
Right.
So then that still has you can take that back to your board and say, million eyeballs last weekend
Right.
saw our logo. We can extract the value of X from that as well. So
And
we had
do
that
you know what the
case.
demographic there is? As far as you got 1 million eyeballs, is that young men 18 to 25, or is that people that are worth 10 million or more that are 50 years old?
You know what? It's split fairly evenly.
Really?
You look at that sweet spot of uber wealthy 40 to 60, and you're probably about 30% of the audience. And then you're another 30% that are 18 and under who
Right.
want to look at cars, and they're a global audience. They're around the world looking at it and tuning in at some very late times. So the fact that they got on a computer and looked is fascinating to me. It's like, wow, you really must be a fan of GT racing to be up at 3 a.m. in Singapore watching this. That surprises me.
I've always wondered if there's a virtuous circle between, as you're sitting here saying this, between sponsoring something that is an event driven primarily of people of means, that the perfect sponsor would be somebody who is selling something to people of means, and by attracting them through their sponsorship, they're also attracting future teams for you.
Yes, I think
that the
so.
guest of your sponsor ends up being your customer in future years as another race car driver.
Absolutely.
Because it seems like a very addictive thing.
And there's a cachet to being part of this, and we try to look for partners that are mindful of that.
Absolutely. So, okay, so there's two. Let's go to the third one, the automotive manufacturer. So when I was researching your interview, and I was going and I was looking at, by the way, your guys' video production crew, top notch, top notch. Watching
We're no town hall, but we aspire, yeah.
Trust me, kid, we'll get you there. But when I look at you, one of the things that jumps out to somebody who drives a Ford F-150 is my God, they took a Ferrari 488 and put a big old fin on the back and all of and wrapped it, and heck, I just want to drive a 488, right? But does SRO sell Ferraris for Ferrari?
That is a great question. And I've seen research that supports absolutely, and I'll use Bentley as a good example because they have a bespoke and the whole company.
That's another crazy one. A Bentley is a race car?
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to have favorites, but let's just say I like that one.
GT.
Yeah, I love that car, and I love the story behind it.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, they will draw a correlation to being in market, racing a Bentley Continental GT, and making sales of Bentley Continentals in that same market. They can draw that correlation. So to your point, your question, does driving a Ferrari race car around the track sell Ferrari street cars, or does it just sell Ferrari race cars? And the answer is it sells both. And it works well. And that's why we have so many repeat OEMs with us.
Does it sell Ferrari race cars? Unpack that one for me for a bit. Okay, I'm naive on this one. So Ferrari, I can buy a 488, I can buy a 488 race car.
488 GT3 from Michelotto, which is the company that builds the Ferrari GT race car.
So they take a Ferrari and
Build
make
this.
it to you, to your guys' spec.
Correct.
This is getting more exciting by the minute.
Yeah.
So you could, so this is turnkey. If I had the means
Right.
and I decided I wanted to get into racing, and providing I could write the check,
Correct.
I could have a team in a few months.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the other part of the business model. They're now service providers in the category. They say, Jeff, we know how busy you are, we know what you're doing, but you've got a skill set, we've seen you behind the wheel, you come out to COTA, you've done
Yep.
some track days. You know what? We'll put you in this car. We already own this car. You're going to pay to insure it on the weekend, Jeff, so that if you do put it in the wall, we can rebuild it and afford to, but here you go. And you'll make that determination. At some point you go, yeah, but I'm looking at the new Mercedes. I'm looking at the new Ferrari. Are we going to buy one of those? Well, if you want to, Jeff, then it's your car, you know, and that's your decision. So people will come along thinking, and we've talked about it before with, you know, the aspect of engineers and everything else you do. Some may say, I don't want to spend that 7-figured investment, of which the car is only half of it, to go out and do this, to pay the staff and do all that. I would much rather just write a check to you as a service provider, and I come in and the term we use
is the
is
NetJets of racing.
Exactly, arrive and drive.
Arrive and drive.
And there's a lot of that. I would say half the paddock is arrive and drive.
So that's like the gateway drug to the guy that eventually is going to staff out his own team.
Exactly.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So is there many of those? I would imagine at SRO, you have a vested interest to make sure that secondary market of those arrive and drive teams are top notch and ready, and there's always capacity, I would imagine.
Right, and again, we want to see them successful because we want to be able to bring new people in that want to and can, and give them the experience, and then give them a good experience. Whether, you know, the fun thing about it again is because we talk about the egos, the money, et cetera. You know, at the GT level, you're $1 million minimum. I mean, you can be $1.5 million before you know it. And this, remember, is so that you can win some prize money that might cover the fuel bill. You're going to get a pretty trophy. But what you're really getting is something that you can't be easily replicated. So you're spending a lot of money that is gone. It's disposable income. You may be able to judge or show back to your board or your stakeholders, well, we got this level of exposure, we made these critical business deals, but at the end of the day, you still spend $1 million.
This is feeding the competitive ethos of leaders. Is really what this is. And there's nothing, that's great.
Yes.
That's a healthy way to do it, right?
Indeed.
So let's say for a minute that I aspire, and Wendy, if you're watching, my bride, relax. But if we're aspiring to that.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, let's say that. You just don't write a check and then race. Now, I got to think this is like getting a pilot's license. You're a threat to society unless properly trained here. So walk me through how somebody who says, I'm going to do that, gets to the point where you let them do that and not kill somebody in the process.
You know, it's just like any other thing, and you use a pilot example, it's the same way. You're going to have to be properly licensed, and we have tiers of licensing where, you know, we talked earlier today with a young man with a Volkswagen GTI. And although I no longer have a specific class for that, that person with the weekend racing there can quickly move towards something where they can go out and race wheel to wheel, get a license in that category, and then progress to what we call an international license. And then that has gradients as well, right up to the people who are racing with a grade 1 license in F1.
So this is something SRO does, or this is FIA? Who is this?
So that's a great point to bring up. Within every country, there are governing bodies to this. We work with the governing bodies, which in turn work with the FIA globally. And we license to an international spec. When it comes to racing, particularly at the GT levels. At our entry level, what we call a touring car level, we have a much more open licensing process, and we actually handle that ourselves.
You handle it yourself. And then each team has got to provide the appropriate amount of insurance and and all that to cover.
We sign a lot of releases.
A lot of releases. All right, so this last stakeholder, this is interesting. You'd mentioned 16,000 at COTA. Spa's a big deal. You've got live streaming and you've got CBS Sports. All right. But is it safe to say that maybe the spectator side of the business model is still the blue ocean yet to go get?
Absolutely.
As far as the biggest one?
Yeah, I think it's something that today we talk about it, and you mentioned you wanted to talk later about the digital area and
Yeah,
things along
right.
that line. But in a world where we have so many, I like to say 500 channels and nothing on, and the same way on our weekend entertainment. Here we are in Austin, where at any moment there's a live entertainment venue, even in our supermarkets. So,
Right.
think now I've got to grab that person and say, well, it looks kind of pedestrian when you watch it from the outside of, they start the car and they drive around for a while. This is fun?
Yeah.
How is that? Now, if you get them involved and you get them a lap around the track, now I'm intrigued by it. But that next level of getting spectators, or I'll call it more engaged participants, that is the next level for us. And there's probably, I'm waiting for you to ask me the digital question next, or the gaming question.
We're going to get
next.
to that, but I'm holding that at the end.
Exactly, because
building up the tension.
I think that's going to be the one that we talk about that, because how do we, in a virtual reality-driven world, and a Call of Duty world, we'll say, how do we connect with that type of person who is very good in front of a computer screen? Are they going to be very good on track? Is there a way we can do that?
Yeah, and there's been examples of that, right? Was it an F1 or F?
So there,
The young man that was a really good game, and then he transitioned okay, but his team, I remember there was engine problems or whatnot, the Netflix special about that.
Exactly, and it's actually been done in a wide variety of racing, both in North America and Europe and in Asia, where someone has successfully gone from I hate to use the word video game career, but let's just say a virtual or digital based level of in a car, driving in a very sophisticated simulator, and then saying, welcome to a short dirt track in Kansas, can you hold your own?
Right.
And it's been proven that they can. And I think that's fascinating. And as we start to work on that on a technology level to where people can compete with the people they see on track in a real-time level, that's going to be that next level, because esports and all that do bring a real interesting audience.
I think you're onto something there. Last year, I went to COTA for qualifying. And it was the first time that I'd ever been to F1. And what I saw, for me personally, it was somewhat anticlimactic. And the reason for that is that as an American, and you think of racing, I think of an oval.
Right.
Right? And it never dawned on me, but in an oval, if it's NASCAR, I can see the whole race. And when I went, I forget which turn I was on, but it was surreal that everyone had earplugs in, and everyone's head was down looking at phones on an app, and then they would all look up and it'd jump, and then they're back on their phone. And there's 100,000 people there, but they're seeing maybe 3% of the race. And if you're not at the finish line, you hear about the finish, you attend.
You hopefully caught it.
But other than the experience of being around the crowd and hearing it, you're better off seeing that race on TV.
Absolutely.
In terms of actually experiencing it. Now, what you're talking about, though, is really a jump ahead, because the one thing when I watch F1 that I really do, you always enjoy it, is when they cut to the driver's perspective from 2 or 3 people. So, and we're going to get to this in a second. This is the segue, but am I hearing this correctly, that SRO is looking at that type of an experience on steroids in the future for the spectator?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of us in motorsports are going to do it, because you've seen the rise of esports, you see the success of it, and it's been proven that these individuals can be on track.
Yes.
So as we get into a world where they're in a 5G world where there's milliseconds of latency, we can create a sim where those people can be there and they can say, I'm racing against this level of person. And that's going to make it really fun. And it gives something for people to engage more and have more on the ground looking at it. I think the other aspect, to kind of back up a little bit outside of that technology example, we've seen it here at F1. A lot of people come now and say, oh, I went to see Taylor Swift. This year it's Imagine Dragons and Pink, and that's why they're going. There happens to be, I jokingly say, let's hold a concert and a motorsports event will break out.
Yes.
And so, we're looking at that, and I think you're going to find for that consumer audience, and especially in a very, I came from Southern California, and I used to say the only way you would get people out to an event, because people wouldn't come to an event if it was foggy.
Right.
Because there were just a million other things to do. And I said, the only thing we need now is ritual human sacrifice. And then we can finally get people to come out and see something. But other than that, there wasn't a real draw.
That's great. All right, we're going to get a little bit more into the future of SRO because I think you're onto something huge. But first,
5G is coming. More data, more connected things, and capabilities we haven't yet fathomed. But already government and universities, base station, handset, and IoT companies, they have all gone to Hiller Measurements for inspired design in research, development, and production test. Why don't you?
and we're back. So going back to something that I'd said before, it's a little surreal. I'm not going to lie. It's a little surreal to be more interested in seeing whether Renault or Red Bull or Toro Rosso or something being more of a conversation piece than F1 about who's going to take fourth place than it is who's going to take first or second.
Did you see that exciting pass between third and fourth?
Yeah.
Or fifth and sixth?
It's like,
And that's your haves and have-nots.
Your have and have-nots.
Yeah.
Right. So in your role, you have, we had said before, you've got a lot of big personalities that are all competitive.
Yes.
That's not just drivers and teams, that's manufacturers.
As well, definitely.
Right? Talk to me about the art of arbitrating your business and avoiding having haves and have-nots along the way.
It is always going to happen.
Okay.
I liked an example from years ago that Porsche had swept the weekend. And the very German fellow that was managing the Porsche program came in to speak to the series official about it and was arguing for more benefits for Porsche. And the series person spoke back to him and said, but you won, you swept the podiums, you won every race. So what more do you want? And the fellow said, we want to dominate. and that, but that's true of every OEM.
Yeah.
Ferrari is
Right.
no different, and the level of passion. So to answer your question about how do we as a series manage that, it's that constant data loop that we are always
Yes.
looking at. Did we balance it out? Because I think what you'll find when you look at the championships that we run around the globe, you do not see a single manufacturer dominating all of them.
Right.
And it is because we're constantly balancing and allowing the fact that, at this track, this vehicle, this super heavy Bentley, is not going to do well in the rain. And it's just not going to be their day. But on the other hand, they have this gross acceleration. Let's just say,
Yes.
these are not accurate metrics, but they have a gross acceleration that's going to allow them to do this. Those are the type of things that we try to balance then. And you can't just say to that manufacturer, well, next week will be better. No, you're going to have to show within a few tenths. And quite a few of our races will have 10 to 15 cars within 1/10 of a second. So that's the blink of an eye.
Across manufacturers or all of the same?
All across manufacturers.
You've got a Bentley, a McLaren, and a Ferrari, and they're all within tenths of each other.
Yes.
How do you mandate the design of these race cars?
So you mentioned that earlier, and I didn't really
Yes.
get to hit on that. We
Yeah.
use the word balance of performance, which
Right.
is something we do. The other aspect, though, is we start with a base homologation. You mentioned about the FIA and
Yeah.
others. We actually have our own internal homologation trademark for GT4.
Right.
GT3 is something that we do with the FIA, and it is a class then that manufacturers build their car to a specific spec. So we start with a power to weight and basic information to begin with before we might individually balance that car, adding some weight, taking some weight off, giving them an ability for more air, obviously, which will make more power, things like that we'll work with.
Okay, so let's talk about the white elephant in the room as far as the future. F1 a number of years ago went hybrid.
Yes.
Now we have probably one of the more fastest growing part is Formula E.
Yes.
Right? We already have a Gen 2 car. There's a tremendous amount of change. Everything that I believe you're running today is all fueled,
Fossil fuel based.
fossil fuel based. Is there change afoot? Is SRO going to embrace an electric future in what you put on the market?
I think, we talked before about our target audience and what we do. The answer is yes.
Okay.
But let me say yes, but, or yes, and how.
Okay.
And we debuted a concept this last summer at our 24 Hours of Spa, and we called it GTX. And the idea behind it is that people know the automotive world, they know the original concerns, like where did we get the 500 from? Why was that? What was the question is, can a car really go 500 miles? That was
Right.
that was
There
the
was a
question.
theoretical
Yeah,
limit,
exactly.
possibly.
Can
Right.
we see it? Is there bragging rights behind it? Well, now we see the same thing being discussed in hybrid vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles. Well, how far will they go? What can they do compared to their other counterparts? So we as a series, rather than try to go into the Formula E space or some of the Formula GT programs, we've inaugurated something that we call GTX, where we'll actually work within city centers, showing the capacity and different uses of these vehicles in a wide variety of challenging circumstances, and maybe one or two aspects on track as well. But really the original...
The renaissance of Grand Touring.
Exactly.
Is what it is.
Yeah, which is really fun.
Interesting. So are you is that attracting in your mindset the same drivers, adding that class to their paddock themselves, or is this going to reach a completely different clientele of Grand Touring racers to SRO?
I think both.
Yeah.
I think we'll see people who will say, you know what, this is something that matches my environmental consciousness and I want to be part of it.
Right.
That have no experience in motorsports and they'll want to step into it. And maybe because they want to have that fun experience that not everybody has had. We all hear about the Orient Express. How many of us have taken the Orient Express?
Right.
But we love to be able to tell our friends, oh, I took that, it was amazing. It was an interesting experience. That's what we'll do with GTX, is we'll give them an experience like no other that they'll be able to do with a vehicle that they believe in. And in turn, there will be the people in our paddock today that say, from a particularly a manufacturer standpoint, well, that's something we want to get behind.
So are these going to be hybrid or fully electric?
We're looking to be fully electric or alternative fuel, hydrogen, et cetera. We're really not interested in hybrid. We may have hybrid support vehicles.
So you're kind of waiting on the automotive industry to
If I just
provide
knew
product,
people,
right?
If I just knew people in the technology and mesurement business,
We
this
will
would-
talk about that.
That would
yes,
help. That
we
would
have
help a
an
lot.
answer for you. But seriously, you got Tesla, Karma, the Taycan's coming out. There's few to choose from. Well, that's not true. Lamborghini's coming out.
Correct. With a capacitor
Super cab,
vehicle.
yeah, that's
So
right.
that's kind of neat.
Yeah. So are those the cars you're gonna start with?
Certainly. Well, actually, and if people can look at it up online, but you're really looking at some cases like Bentley has already proposed some vehicles that way.
Really?
That they're doing. Audi the same way. So there's some manufacturing in the space. Yeah.
Q-tron or whatever.
Yes.
So you're gonna have a Grand Touring of a crossover SUV?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay. So at what point do we get to start tinkering with these cars and turning them into race cars instead of...
Something that we're very proud of, and we like to point that out to people, is that once upon a time, Ferrari was a garage-based business, a constructor, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's something that we at the SRO are really excited when we created our GT4 category, was to embrace that and allow
Right.
people, KTM, the motorcycle manufacturer, got involved with a company called Ryder Engineering and created something called the Crossbow.
Oh, the Crossbow.
That has
That's
run
fabulous. I remember the original Top Gun or Top Gear guys did a thing on that. Yeah.
And there was a Crossbow that was actually in the Fast and Furious, one of the
was it?
19
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Well, showed up there. But we've seen Lamborghini, before they came involved, having a car built that way. So there's been another one called the R1 Sin, and finally the Panos Avezzano that just won our championship in that category. So there is an interest level, and I bring all those up because when it comes to the GTX category, we really want to encourage that person or group of people, especially right now we see such a, I don't want to say garage is really not there, but a grassroots level on battery power, recharging, et cetera, and companies that maybe they were vendors in the transportation space,
right.
But they weren't up there. We want those individuals and their engineering teams to say, we could build something for that. I've always wanted to try, and we'll definitely be working with an experimental category in GTX.
Full disclosure, we're one of them. We'll talk about that later. But that's exciting stuff there. So are you going to stick with the Grand Touring format, though? Is it how far we can drive, or do you see yourself coming to where it's 90 minutes? Teams are racing.
I think
that's two different drive trains.
Exactly. That's what's really fascinating. And when, offline today, we were talking about capacitors and different things and some of the school projects out there. We know that there's those engineering students that are out there now that are building the cars of tomorrow. And we're excited about that. And we want those individuals to look at it and say, how do we get involved with that? And then I wrote in my notes today, is it 30, it starts with 20, is it 20, 30, 40, 50? When do we go to 24 hours? When do we demonstrate that? Because if anybody who watches long form racing, I'll use an example, and this is a shameless plug for our business, but at the end of 2020 in October, we'll celebrate our 8-hour race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Well, Indy is synonymous with the 500-mile race in May, and everybody talks about it. But one of the things that facility is looking to do, it is still the single largest single-day sporting event in the world. They put upwards to 300,000 people in that venue. I think we might have slightly less when we do ours, but what they look at Indy is they want to become a proving grounds for the next generation of transportation. They want to be able to prove this is the place. You knew it for, in 1900 to create a 500-mile race, and now you know it in the next millennium.
Right. Well, I'm excited about that because we won't let the cat out of the bag today, but we are a major fan of everything having to do with electric and supercapacitors. We'll make some announcements in the future, but man, I can't wait for that future. So let's get into the big question that we keep taunting, which is esports.
Yes.
Okay, so esports is a proven big thing. What does that look like for SRO? Is EA Sports going to have an SRO? What is it? Paint that picture for me.
In Europe, there's a game already published called the SRO Corso, and our cars and livery are featured in it. We were prior on the platform and the PS4 platform with a game called Project Cars 2, and we are our cars and livery for the World Challenge Series. We're there. So we've already been involved in gaming, as it were, but the next step now is that esports level with the technology companies. And you mentioned earlier about CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is a very valuable partner to us because they're providing the cloud security that we need. When you think about all of our data going up that way, and then another partner we have, Amazon Web Services, is the same way. Everything's cloud-based and will be more so going forward. So the security of that data is very important. And when you get into esports, when you're linking competitions around the world, how do you avoid cheating? How do you avoid gaming the system? And when milliseconds are at stake, what are you watching for people doing? And then that ties right back into the engineering story of how to get the fastest car, maybe that's still fossil fuel powered on the track. These digital teams that are emulating it in their on-site, they're creating an event, a spectacle, as it will, and we'll be bringing them on site. This next year, we'll do it at 1 to 2 venues where we'll have an esports tournament that will show the same track. We are not quite ready to say it'll happen live where you can say, I want to pick the live driver, or I want to pick the driver that's behind the console here, but certainly they'll be able to emulate each other. And you'll be able to look at it and say, that's interesting. That guy's turning the same lap, slower, faster. What are they doing different? And that's going to be fun for everybody. That brings a spectator aspect to it, but also a global competitive aspect. At the 24 Hours of Spa, I think we had 30 simulators running during the 24-hour race where people can look at and drive the same course.
How was that received?
Very well.
Was there people queued up to do
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think we had 60,000 people through it, but there were still tens of thousands that were looking at it, watching it.
So in the U.S., can I get my hands on this game? When can I? When? How? In the future? What does that look like to be able to participate?
So my desire obviously would be by first quarter you'd see the SRO Corso US one. They're going and doing the tracks now in the States, so that we can look at the same liveried cars that they've seen, and then I'm driving it now here in the States. So they've got the game engine, they've got everything else. Now they've got to match the tracks up to it, and that's just a process of time. I wish I could tell you the exact date, but it'll be sometime in 2020.
All right, well, let me jump on the other side here. Last question. Let's say we do the sequel to this interview in 3 years. You and I get back together again in 3 years, sit right here, chairs are nicer, set's nicer, but we sit back and we look back at today. What are you going to be most proud about that is going to happen over these next 3 years that you're going to tell our audience about when we get back together again? What does that future look like?
You know what? It's going to be a soft thing and then a hard thing. The soft thing is we're going to have created something that is incredibly special that will bridge the gap between that's a car and instead that's a competitive experience. And we're going to have done that. And it's not going to be about old fat white males. And so that's something is a soft goal that I think is going to happen, and I'm going to project that, and God willing, we'll be sitting here in 3 years to have that conversation. And on the hard side is we're going to see this technology stuff that we're talking about today that we know is out there. It is going to be commonplace.
Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely, well, of course. Yeah, we knew that. Remember we were joking about whether that game is, now we'll be saying what's happening via social media on our phone that we saw in what virtual league. We'll be able to talk about that, and just as though it's the most commonplace thing.
I sense that in 3 years we'll be talking about the best way to view your sport is to participate in it.
Yes.
And that
Great
there
point.
will be the population you serve will be 95% virtual, and of which a third to a half of it are participating, not just viewing. What'll be fascinating when we get together is what does that mean in terms of new business models that spin off from this? It sounds as though you guys are just on the precipice of a completely redefined business model entirely.
I agree.
Well, let's make sure that we schedule that time together in 3 years, because that's going to be a wild discussion.
Or in 36 months.
Or in 36 months, whichever one comes first. So we're going to post SRO Motorsports below on our channel. This presentation, hopefully, you'll host at SRO.
You bet.
But man, it sure is a blessing to have you here, and I look forward to making some future announcements about how we're investing in the future of motorsports, as well as our own business, and hopefully our business will benefit yours in the very near future. Greg, what a blessing to have you at AE Squared.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Hey, next time on AE Squared, this is going to be a unique one. We're going to have an episode with the patriarch and founder of this company, Hiller Measurements, coming up here in a few weeks. Paul Hiller is going to sit and share the story of not just how this company got started, but how the company we all grew up got started. It's going to be a great story. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode of AE Squared. AE Squared is a Hiller Town Hall production. Copyright 2019. Video by Anthony Longoria. And audio by Mark Skura. Music by Brian Patterson. Want tickets to a future taping? Well, stop on by at hillermej.com/townhall. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and join us next time when we introduce you to F-22 pilot turned entrepreneur Daniel Robinson of Red 6. Red 6 is doing some incredible work taking augmented reality and applying it towards our Defense Department. In the process, they aim to save billions of dollars of yours and my tax money. Make sure to check us next time on AE Squared.